Really, the only other violation that's present here is just the engine that's under the tarp. So I'm going to go ahead and write up a correction notice and we'll go from there. There's a program that's called Crime Resistant Community Living, and part of that there's what they call the broken window theory, where if you've got one broken window, soon you're going to have 2 broken windows or 3 broken windows. And what we find is in these neighborhoods where there's one code violation, pretty soon there's another violation and another violation, or you have one abandoned vehicle left in a lot, well, soon there's another one and another one. Well, people see that, and they see that these things are unattended. They see that the neighborhood doesn't really care, and then they'll start to target those neighborhoods for criminal activity. And there's scientific data that shows the correlation between crime prevention and code enforcement being actually enforced, and that's probably one of the biggest benefits to actually having the codes enforced for that. It's a good crime reducer. And then also there's some safety issues involved. When you've got a car with no tires up on 4 jacks sitting out on the road, you don't want a child to get hurt, or anybody else for that matter to get hurt if they were to accidentally hit it if it's not real stable. And sometimes people don't understand why that's such a big deal, but there's safety concerns with that. Large piles of debris and rubble, and mostly with children, you're not going to keep them away from those things typically, and so there's some safety issues involved that we try to just clear those up as well. I would kind of start off the day checking what new cases we may have. We have a code enforcement line that's it's an unmanned line. It just has a message on it where people can leave their complaints there, and then to check any voicemail that I may have on my own extension that comes in. And then we also have a program through the city, the request tracker program, that people can submit online complaints. And depending on if I get there first or if my supervisor gets there first, one of us will pull the calls off of those and initiate the cases for those. And then after that, it's pretty much packing up and heading out to the field. Luckily, I have a mobile unit, so I can pretty much stay out most of the day and write all my reports out while I'm in the car, and it helps me just process things a little bit quicker that way. When we first get our initial complaint, we will initiate a case, which gives us a report number, and then we have cards that we mail out to our complainants that give them the case number and the code officer that's assigned to the case so that they can follow up whenever they would like. And then we begin the case process where I'll go out and do an initial inspection on the property and see if there is actually a violation at the location. And if there is, then I'll attempt to contact the owner typically and give them a correction notice explaining what's wrong and how to correct it. And it gives them about 2 weeks to get that fixed. And then from that point, depending on whether or not they come into compliance or not, depends on what kind of the next step. And our hope is that people will voluntarily do what we've asked to come into compliance. We really don't necessarily want to take people to the code enforcement board. We don't want people to get fines, and we don't want those things to happen. So we certainly do shoot for voluntary compliance. If they obviously come into compliance, we close the case and we let the complainant know what the status is. And should they not come into compliance, we kind of try to give them maybe a little extra time, get in contact with them, try to work with them to gain voluntary compliance. And if that doesn't happen, then we have to refer it to the code enforcement board, and then they make a decision on what we do next.
And particularly with children that may be in that vicinity quite a bit, it might be something that the city would need to act upon.
Really, I think one of the best features of my job is being able to drive around, not being stuck behind a desk. After 9 years of dispatch where you are literally tethered to your position, there's no windows, there's nothing. To be able to get in the truck and drive around and work that way it's nice. It's just to see the sunshine. And then also I like being able to interact with people. I like the face-to-face contact. I like being able to explain to people what their violations are and how they can correct them and to help them understand. So I'm going to give you a correction notice, but all this basically just says is that the vehicle can't be stored in the condition that it's in. It can't be up on jacks like that. This part here talks about the vehicle parts, which would be the motor. This part talks about the vehicle. It just says that they need to be stored, either behind the fence or in an enclosed building. It helps the community. it's encouraging to see when you will get a correction notice at one place that the neighbor will clean up theirs as well, just on their own, whether it was in bad condition or not. It seems to improve the condition of the neighborhood. Yeah, really, when I'm not at work, I'm typically either at home with my family. I've got a 7-year-old, 3-year-old, a 1-year-old, and a soon-to-be-born-year-old. So we like to, as the weather's starting to get a little bit nicer, do some stuff outside and just play, or a lot of time just hanging out with the kids and my wife. And then outside of that, we work again with the youth at our church, and that takes a lot of time. We do a couple different retreats a year. We go on a week-long wilderness trip with them, and just different weekly items that we do, monthly events, and so there's a lot of planning and a lot of time spent there. So if I was to say I did 2 things, it would be that would be it: hanging out with my family and hanging out with those kids. So, hi, I'm Jason Montgomery, Code Enforcement Officer with the Richland Police Department, and I am Richland.